The hum of the ship was like the breathing of some ancient beast, steady, slow, and impossibly vast. I stood alone before the observation viewport, staring into the blue sphere that floated below, a planet still alive. Oceans glimmered, clouds coiled like white smoke over continents of green and gray. From here it was beautiful. From here it looked innocent. But beauty, I have learned, is the Emperor's cruelest lie. I could still hear the low chime of the cathedral bell somewhere deep within the ship. A sound that carried through steel corridors like a heartbeat, slow, patient, ritualistic. It marked the hours of waiting before the final sanction, the Exterminatus. My hand rested on the cold brass rail of the viewport, fingers tracing the sigils etched there. Purity seals, oaths of duty, the wax long cracked and flaking. The Vox channels were quiet now. The last requests for authorization had been sent. Somewhere on the ship's lower decks, tech priests chanted the activation rites of the cyclonic torpedoes. Their binary hymns rose and fell like waves of static prayer. I had done this before. 3 times, in fact. But never like this. Never with silence so heavy that it pressed against my ribs. I told myself I was waiting for confirmation from Terra, that the decision was still in someone else's hands. But I knew better. The seal was already broken. The Emperor's judgment was already moving through the circuits and codes that tied this ship to the holy bureaucracy of the Imperium. The truth is, I was only waiting for the courage to say the words aloud. Beneath that dying planet's sky, millions still lived their last hours in ignorance. I could almost feel them, a planet-wide hum of life, like static crawling under my skin. In hive cities, factories burned, their smokestacks stabbing the clouds. Priests carried relics through crowded streets, chanting prayers to deaf heavens. A child somewhere was being born. A mother somewhere was whispering a lullaby, and above them I waited to erase it all. I leaned closer to the viewport until my breath fogged the glass. The void outside was silent, yet alive with the shimmer of dust and distant stars. The world below looked peaceful, like a relic locked in amber. But peace, too, is a deception. Behind me, the chapel doors opened with a hiss of hydraulics. Footsteps echoed, measured, metallic. "Lord Inquisitor," came the voice of my attendant. It was a rasping, artificial thing, half man, half machine, a servant grafted to duty. "The Mechanicus reports readiness. All systems await your word." I didn't turn. "And the surface?" "Still transmitting civilian Vox scripts. Prayers mostly, some confusion. They suspect orbital quarantine, not annihilation." I closed my eyes. For a moment, the silence between us stretched, heavy and electric. "Have them continue their prayers," I said at last. "The Emperor hears everything." "Even this." "Yes, my lord." He bowed, or at least the sound of servos bending suggested so, and withdrew. The doors sealed again. I was alone once more. Alone with the silence, the hum, and the terrible calm that always comes before fire. I moved to the command dais, where the Exterminatus rites were engraved upon a ring of polished obsidian. My reflection stared back at me, a pale face framed in black armor, the inquisitorial rosette hanging like a weight at my chest. My eyes were bloodshot, sleepless. The light of the dying world painted them blue. I traced the first line of the script carved into the dais. "Mercy is the lie of heretics. Purity demands flame." How many times had I read those words? How many times had I believed them? A faint tremor ran through the ship, the cyclonic payloads being aligned. Somewhere deep below, sacred engines roared to life, drowning out the last of my doubts. And yet, I found myself thinking of the people on that world. The workers toiling in manufactoria, the preachers crying their sermons, the soldiers standing watch on walls they didn't understand. They would see the sky split open soon. They would see light that no eye was meant to see. Would they curse us? Would they pray harder? Would they even have time to scream? I had seen the aftermath before. A world turned to glass. Oceans boiled into vapor. Mountains ground into dust finer than bone. But this world, this one had something different. Something that made me hesitate. It was alive. I pressed the vox bead in my ear. "This is Inquisitor Rail," I said. "Begin pre-ignition rites." There was a pause, the sound of static breathing. Then a mechanical voice replied, "By your will, Lord Inquisitor." Commencing sacred sequence, the vox cut. I turned once more to the viewport. It was said that when the Emperor still walked among men, he wept for every world he had to burn. I wondered if he still did, or if his tears too had turned to ash long ago. A sudden flicker on the comms display caught my eye, a minor signal pulsing from the surface. Not an official transmission, more like a dying frequency gasping for attention. Curiosity got the better of me. I adjusted the gain, filtered the static. A voice came through, faint, childlike, reciting a hymn. "Golden Father, hold the stars still, keep the sky from falling, light the path of the faithful when the sun stops calling." Her voice trembled, then faded. For a moment, the vast machinery of death surrounding me felt like a mockery. One child whispering into the dark, and I was about to drown her world in fire. I cut the signal. My hand shook slightly. I remembered another world years ago. Another Exterminatus. The first time. I had been younger then, full of certainty, full of the Emperor's holy fire. I remembered the exhilaration, the purity of command, the righteous conviction that what we did was sacred. But when the torpedoes fell and the world cracked open like an egg, I saw the faces of those we condemned in the reflected light. I heard the echoes of their voices in the static that followed. And in that silence afterward, I felt something inside me die. Now it was happening again. And I was older, colder, but no less haunted. The ship's interior lights dimmed to crimson. Warning sigils appeared on the command hololith. Exterminatus. Authorization. Pending final verification. I drew in a breath. My thumb hovered over the purity seal that would confirm the order. One word, and it would all begin. The stillness was unbearable. The hum of engines beneath me became a heartbeat. The air itself felt heavy with expectation. I thought of the oceans below, the cities glowing under twilight, the spires piercing the clouds. I imagined the smell of the rain, the sound of thunder, the flicker of life that would soon be erased. This was what the Inquisition called duty. This was what the ecclesiarchy called faith. But in that moment, neither word felt pure. The chime rang again, once, twice. A slow toll, the sound of inevitability. I pressed my palm against the activation rune. The purity seal flared bright red, then burned away in a hiss of sacred fire. Confirmation codes began to cascade across the hololith. One after another, and then the final line appeared. Exterminatus. Authorized. The chamber grew colder. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard voices. Whispers threading through the air ducts, through the metal, through the ship itself. Echoes of prayers or screams or both. I turned back to the viewport. The planet still looked so calm, so unaware. A thin line of light glimmered on its dark side, the reflection of our torpedoes' guidance arrays arming in silence. I felt something rise in my chest, not triumph, not relief. Something hollow, something like grief dressed in armor. I whispered to no one in particular, "Forgive me, if forgiveness still exists." Then the vox crackled. "Awaiting your mark, Lord Inquisitor. Shall we deliver the Emperor's mercy?" I closed my eyes. The silence before the flame was over. "Do it." A deep vibration rolled through the deck. the beginning of apocalypse. But even as I stood there, watching the light crawl across the darkened world below, I felt something shift within me. I had given the order, I had unleashed the fire, and yet I felt no victory, only the faint realization that in destroying the impure, I might have burned the last pure thing left inside myself. The silence was gone now, only the waiting remained, the waiting for the fire to speak. Judgment, they say, is the Emperor's purest weapon. But judgment, I have learned, is forged not in light, but in shadows, whispers, and the silence between screams, before the Exterminatus. Before the silence above that blue world, there had been days of inquiry, weeks of ritual, months of doubt. I remember the echo of my boots on the marble floors of the tribunal hall, a place built to humble men who thought themselves holy. The ceiling was lost in shadow, the air thick with incense and machine oil. Rows of robed adepts chanted the litanies of verification, their voices like the grinding of old gears. At the center stood the throne of inquiry, a vast, iron construct shaped like a cage, its occupant suspended by chains and tubes. A man, or what was left of one, his eyes hollowed, his limbs bound by the machinery of truth. He was the planetary governor once, now stripped of title and flesh. His mind burned open for my inspection. The Mechanicus priest beside me murmured, "His confession remains incomplete, Lord Inquisitor." I glanced at the readings scrolling across the hollow slate. The neural patterns flickered erratically, half sanity, half code. Increase the purity index. I want everything. As you command. The priest adjusted the dials. The man in the chair convulsed. His voice broke into static screams. It came from the catacombs, he cried. Whispers in the dark, promises of gold, of immortality. It spoke through the clergy first, then the nobles, then blood bubbled on his lips. The machine hissed. We thought it was the Emperor's will. We thought... Then the words dissolved into gurgles. His body slumped forward. The machine continued humming, collecting data long after life had fled. I remember standing there in silence. The scent of burned flesh, the steady clicking of data keys, the cold detachment of bureaucracy pretending to be faith. It wasn't horror anymore. Horror requires surprise. This was just procedure. Inquisitors are taught that purity is found through protocol, through meticulous obedience to the holy texts, to the rituals that sanctify destruction. So I followed the motions. Every report stamped with the Aquila seal. Every witness branded with the sigil of verification. Every corpse logged, categorized, justified. We called it the process of truth. But somewhere deep inside, a quieter truth gnawed at me. Every form I signed felt like a prayer written in blood. Every signature carried the weight of 1,000 unseen souls. The investigation led us beneath the hive city of Calligra Prime, down where sunlight had never touched. The air was thick with rot and incense, the walls pulsing with fungal growths that shimmered faintly in the dark. We walked in silence, torches cutting through the shadows. My retinue followed, an interrogator, 2 acolytes, a priest clutching his censer like a weapon. The deeper we went, the more the air seemed alive, whispering, breathing. We reached the catacombs' heart, where the old shrines lay defiled. A once holy statue of Saint Damaris stood shattered, its eyes replaced with black crystals that pulsed like dying stars. The priest hissed in horror. By Terra's flame. What blasphemy! Save your breath, I murmured. We're past redemption now. I knelt beside the altar. There, carved into the stone, were words written in a language older than man. We are the light beneath the flame. The heresy was no longer rumor. It was manifest. The vox bead crackled in my ear. My ship's voice. Calm, cold. Lord Inquisitor. Initial readings confirm warp anomalies across the lower strata. The infection has reached systemic saturation, meaning the taint was everywhere. In the air, the blood, the faith. Meaning this world was already dead. We returned to the surface. The sky above the hive was crimson with pollution. Crowds gathered outside the ecclesiarchal palace. Pilgrims, soldiers, penitents. They prayed to the emperor for salvation, unaware that their salvation would come as fire. I walked through them, robes brushing against rags, their voices rising in desperate hymns. Holy Emperor, guide our souls, protect our flesh, burn away our sin, burn away our sin. The irony did not escape me. Inside the palace, I convened with the planetary clergy. They awaited me in the Hall of Penitence, a cathedral built from the bones of saints and criminals alike. The archdeacon bowed deeply, his voice trembling. Lord Inquisitor, the heresy is real, yes, but limited. We can still contain it. The people, they believe, they pray. Surely what? I asked, cutting him off. That faith will hold the walls. That prayer will stop the rot? He hesitated. The Emperor protects. I stepped closer, my voice a whisper that carried more weight than shouting ever could. The Emperor protects. Yes. But he does not forgive. His eyes widened. You would not condemn us all. I can, I said. And I will if that's what it takes to keep his light pure. He fell silent. Around us, the other priests bowed their heads, some in resignation, some in fear. The decision had already been made, not by me, but by the machinery of the Imperium that turns faith into law and law into fire. That night, I stood on the palace balcony overlooking the hive. The city stretched endlessly, a sea of light and smoke. I could feel it, the corruption beneath the beauty, the hidden decay beneath the hymns. The vox in my ear whispered updates. Ritual contamination confirmed. Local PDF compromised. Astropathic signals failing. Each report was another nail in the planet's coffin. The following day, I stood before the High Conclave via HoloLink. 12 Inquisitors appeared as spectral figures, shadows of authority flickering in the void. In the center, Lord Calpurnia, her voice sharp as glass. Rail of the Ordo Hereticus. Present your evidence. I laid it out. The confessions, the data scrolls, the warp readings. The infestation was irreversible. The planet's spiritual fabric had rotted. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lord Calpurnia spoke. Again, you understand what this means? Yes. You understand the cost? I do. Then speak the verdict. I hesitated, just long enough for them to notice. The weight of 1 billion souls pressed down upon my throat. At last I said it. By the authority of the Emperor and the mandate of the Inquisition, I declare Caligra Prime Hereticus Extremis. The only sentence is Exterminatus. The words echoed in the chamber like thunder. One by one, the other Inquisitors nodded. No emotion, no hesitation, just the quiet efficiency of divine murder. The link terminated. Afterward, I sat alone in the cathedral nave. The stained glass above depicted the Emperor in radiant light, arms outstretched over burning cities. His eyes were serene. The hymn of the servitors echoed softly in the background, a mechanical drone that somehow sounded like mourning. I thought of the governor's last words, before his heart stopped. We thought it was the Emperor's will. And perhaps it was. That's the cruelty of faith. Even when it leads us to damnation, it convinces us that we walk the righteous path. I returned to my quarters. The walls were lined with purity seals, each one a promise of obedience. I tore one off and let it fall to the floor. Obedience had brought us here. Obedience had turned justice into ritual, truth into fire. Still, I couldn't rebel. Not truly, because rebellion would mean heresy, and heresy was the only thing worse than guilt. In the hours that followed, I signed the final documents, cold parchment, warm blood, Exterminatus Protocol 431B, authorized, final appeals, denied, Emperor's mercy, not applicable. Each signature carved a little deeper into my soul. Later, as the ships began their final positioning, I found myself once again in the cathedral. The archdeacon was there, still praying, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. He looked up at me. "You've decided then?" "Yes," he nodded slowly. "Then let us pray together one last time." We knelt before the altar. The candles flickered. The air was heavy with incense and resignation. He began the prayer. "Emperor of Man, judge us not by our weakness, but by our devotion." I joined him. "And may your fire cleanse what our faith could not." When it ended, we sat in silence, the kind of silence that feels eternal. Then he asked softly, "Do you believe he forgives us?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know any more. That night I left the cathedral and walked the upper decks alone. The ship's engines thrummed beneath my feet. The stars burned bright beyond the viewports. Cold, indifferent witnesses. I thought of the governor, the priests, the child singing through the vox. I thought of the faces I would never see again. And as I reached the observation chamber once more, I whispered the verdict not as a declaration, but as a prayer. Exterminatus. The word felt heavier than any weapon. That was the judgment, not of me upon them, but of the Imperium upon itself. And as the cyclonic torpedoes prepared to descend, I realized the truth that the ecclesiarchy would never speak aloud. Judgment isn't about righteousness. It's about obedience, and obedience, in the Imperium, is indistinguishable from madness. The sky burned with a color no natural world should ever bear, an unholy crimson, bleeding into black. The ash fell like snow, and every flake carried a whisper of prayer twisted into a scream. I remember the chapel before it burned. The pews were hand-carved by brothers who believed the emperor would one day look upon their work and smile. Now, those same pews are blackened ribs jutting out of the rubble, glowing with quiet, dying embers. The statues of saints weep molten tears. The incense, once used to sanctify, now reeks of charred flesh and oil. They told us to keep praying as the bombardments began. "Faith will shield you," the preacher cried, his voice cracking as shells shattered the horizon. I believed him once, but faith does not shield you. It blinds you, numbs you, makes you mistake the firestorm for divine light. We were herded underground when the first cyclonic torpedo hit orbit. The air stank of fear and sweat. The old prayed. The young stared at the ceiling as if trying to imagine what the stars looked like now. Each tremor sent dust cascading from above, like the world itself was shedding its last skin. I remember the sound of everything breaking. You don't truly understand destruction until you hear the world scream. Not the people, the planet. The oceans boiling into steam, mountains cracking like brittle bones, cities reduced to dust, before the sound of their ruin even reaches you. It's not just a sound, it's a feeling that crawls inside your skull and sits there, gnawing. We had faith. But faith burns faster than flesh. The priest beside me, Father Olus, clutched a relic as the ground trembled again. It was a fragment of a saint's jawbone, sealed in glass. He held it up and whispered, "He will save us." I wanted to believe him. Emperor, forgive me, I truly did. But when the ceiling cracked and light like a blade cut through the dark, I didn't see salvation. I saw the end. The relic shattered when the blast hit. The glass melted and the bone turned to ash before it even touched the ground. Father Olus burned, his robes catching fire as he screamed words I'll never forget. The Emperor is watching. If he was, then he watched us die. The surface was gone by the time we crawled out. Nothing but a wasteland of glass and flame. The rivers had turned to trenches of molten metal. The air shimmered, thick and heavy with the ghosts of the dead. I saw shadows in the distance, survivors maybe. But the moment they moved, their outlines distorted, burned away by the invisible radiation still licking across the ruins. Even the air was killing us. One of our group, Marin, a guardsman, laughed. A hollow, hysterical laugh. "We're already dead," he said. They just forgot to tell us. He was right. The world had already ended. We were just walking through its corpse, too stubborn to fall. That's when I saw it. The sky opening again, streaks of fire descending from orbit. The final wave. The Exterminatus wasn't just death. It was erasure. They weren't destroying the planet. They were unmaking it. The ground split beneath us, and the wind carried the scent of ozone, metal, and burning souls. I dropped to my knees, not in prayer, but in surrender. For the first time, I didn't ask why, because I finally understood. Exterminatus is not punishment. It is mercy. Mercy for those who have seen too much, for worlds too corrupted to be healed. Mercy from the endless rot that festers beneath human hope. And as the final light consumed us, I thought I heard something, soft, almost kind, a whisper. "Rest, child. The Emperor forgives you." Maybe it was madness, or maybe, for the first time, he truly did. Silence. That's what I remember after the light. No thunder, no screams, no collapse. Just silence so complete it felt sacred. I thought for a moment that death had finally taken me, that I had crossed into the Emperor's light and left the world's ruin behind. But then I breathed. The air entered my lungs like knives. It tasted of copper and soot, and with it came sound, a faint static murmur. The wind whispered across the ruins, dragging with it voices. Not words at first, just tones, broken, layered, like the echoes of people who'd been erased but refused to leave. I opened my eyes. The world was gray. Everything, sky, ground, horizon, was the same dead color, a color that defied life. The sun was gone. The clouds hung low, thick with radioactive dust that glowed faintly when the lightning crawled inside them. It wasn't rain that fell. It was ash. Fine gray and warm. It gathered in my hair, my eyelashes, the cracks in my armor. When I wiped my face, it felt like I was smearing the remains of my world across my skin. I wasn't alone. Marin had survived. Somehow. His eyes were glazed, unfocused. His once gleaming laser gun was warped, half melted, yet he still held it like it meant something. He didn't speak for a long time. We just stood there, surrounded by endless ruin, as the wind carried whispers across the landscape. And then he asked quietly, "Do you hear them too?" I did, but I wished I hadn't. At first I thought it was just the wind. Then I began to recognize words, faint but distinct. Pleas, prayers, apologies. The voices of those who had died above, below, and between. Children crying for their mothers. Soldiers begging for forgiveness. Priests reciting the last rites on endless loop. The dead were still speaking. The psychers used to say that when a world dies, its soul lingers, that the warp feeds on that pain, reshapes it into echoes. I had always dismissed it as superstition. Now I was walking through proof of it. Every step we took stirred the ashes, and with them, the memories of the dead. Marin began to break first. He started talking back to the voices, whispering to them, arguing with them, laughing at jokes only he could hear. When I tried to stop him, he looked at me like I was the ghost. "You don't understand," he said. "They're not gone. They're here. They're us." I told him he was wrong. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Because when I closed my eyes, I heard them too, clearer, closer. My mother's voice. My commanders. Even Father Olus, the priest who had burned beside me. They weren't comforting. They were accusing. You ran, they said. You doubted. You failed. I screamed at the wind until my throat bled. The sound was swallowed by the emptiness. The voices didn't stop. That night, if you can call it night, we camped beside what used to be a riverbed. The ground was cracked, glowing faintly with molten veins beneath. I stared into the fissures, and for a moment I thought I saw faces in the fire, hundreds of them, moving, writhing, whispering. Maybe this is hell, Marin muttered. No, I said. Hell would be merciful. We didn't sleep. Sleep didn't exist anymore. The world hummed, an endless low vibration that pressed against the inside of your skull. It wasn't just the wind or the radiation. It was something deeper, like the planet was trying to speak. The next morning, Marin was gone. I found his footprints leading into the fog, and there, half buried in the ash, lay his helmet. The visor was cracked. Inside it, etched into the inner glass, were words, scrawled in soot and blood. They called me home. I should have run. I should have prayed, but instead I followed, because some part of me wanted to know what waited at the end of those whispers. The ground grew uneven. The fog thickened, heavy with the scent of burnt oil and something sweeter, like incense. Shapes moved in the distance, shadows that shifted when I blinked. They weren't human. They were fragments, silhouettes of people burned into reality itself. When I reached them, they didn't move. They just watched, a mother holding a child, a soldier mid-charge, a man on his knees. Their faces were frozen, but their eyes glowed faintly, like coals refusing to die, and then they spoke, not in sound, but in thought. You were spared. Why? The question dug into me. I didn't have an answer, because I wasn't spared. Not really. Every breath was agony. Every thought was noise. I wasn't alive. I was a witness, a remnant. The world had died, but I hadn't followed, and the dead wanted to know why. I fell to my knees. I tried to speak, but only a sob came out. The figures watched in silence, their forms flickering like candlelight. Then they began to fade, one by one, until only the child remained. She stepped forward, her face expressionless, her voice a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere. The Emperor has forgotten you. And when she vanished, I screamed, not in fear, but in relief, because she was wrong. The Emperor had not forgotten me. He had left me here, to witness, to remember, to repent. The ash swirled around me like a storm, and the whispers grew louder again, no longer mourning, but chanting. A single word, over and over, in a voice that was both many and one. Repent, repent, repent. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound was inside me now, in my blood, in my breath, and as I fell to the ground, shaking, sobbing, half mad from the weight of it all, I realized something terrifying. The Exterminatus hadn't ended. It was still happening, not to the planet, to me. I don't remember how long I wandered after that. Days, hours, time had become meaningless. The sun no longer rose or fell. The sky remained locked in that dull red-black haze, like a wound that refused to close. My boots crunched on glass, not sand, not gravel. Glass, melted cities turned to sheets of reflective death. My reflection followed me, warped, skeletal, coated in soot and guilt. My armor was scorched black. My rebreather hissed with every breath, the only sound that reminded me I was still something close to human. I followed the voices. I didn't know why anymore. Maybe to find Marin, maybe to find absolution, maybe because silence was worse. The terrain began to change. Jagged spires of metal rose from the ground like the bones of a god. They hummed faintly, vibrating with energy I could feel in my teeth. The whispers twisted into something new, deeper, rhythmic, mechanical. That's when I first heard the machine choir. It began as a low tone, like the hum of distant reactors. Then more joined it, layers upon layers until the air itself trembled. It wasn't random. It had structure, harmony, a song, but it was not sung by humans. As I crested a ridge, I saw them, dozens, no, hundreds of servo-constructs scattered across the landscape. Some were intact, others half buried, others still moving despite missing limbs or torsos. They were Mechanicus remnants, servitors, drones, autocantors, all still functioning, all still performing their assigned liturgies long after the priests who programmed them had turned to ash. They were singing to the dead. Each emitted a steady, modulated chant in Binharic, fragments of machine prayer looping endlessly. The tones merged, building into a symphony of devotion to the Omnissiah. Their vox units crackled, voices glitching but determined. Even as the world burned, they continued their sacred duty. Bless the sacred circuit. The flesh fails. The steel endures, for the world is cleansed for the Emperor. The sound was maddening and beautiful. It vibrated through my bones. I felt it behind my eyes. The ground beneath me pulsed with the rhythm of the chant, as though the planet itself had joined the hymn. And that's when I saw the monolith. It rose from the center of the crater, taller than a hive spire, impossibly black, its surface crawling with golden sigils. I knew it wasn't human in origin. It radiated something ancient, something that predated the Imperium itself. Yet the servitors faced it like worshippers before an altar. I approached slowly. The closer I got, the louder the hymn became until my vision began to blur. My auspex screamed warnings, radiation, warp energy, residual virus traces, but I couldn't stop. At the base of the monolith, the ground opened like a wound, exposing the machinery beneath the planet's skin. Vast conduits humming with energy, stretching into infinity, and inside them, movement. I knelt, peering into the glow. What I saw wasn't possible. Faces, thousands of them, pressed against the translucent metal, screaming silently. Human faces. They weren't burned. They weren't decayed. They were alive. I stumbled back. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. The Exterminatus hadn't merely destroyed the world. It had absorbed it. The dead weren't gone. They were data, encoded, preserved in the machine network buried beneath the crust. Their souls, their memories, their agony, all digitized, converted into eternal servitude. The machine choir wasn't mourning. It was maintaining, keeping the memory of the exterminated world alive in binary prayer. I fell to my knees again, overcome by the weight of it. This wasn't destruction, it was transformation. The Imperium hadn't just cleansed the planet. It had turned it into a monument, a data shrine of suffering. I could hear them clearer now, the voices inside the conduits. They weren't random. They were reciting prayers over and over eternally. Some begged for mercy. Some praised the Emperor. Some screamed names. Their voices overlapped into a digital symphony of madness. And for a moment, I understood. The Exterminatus wasn't just about purity. It wasn't vengeance or punishment. It was documentation. Every destroyed world becomes part of the Emperor's archive. A psionic and technological record of humanity's sins. Each cry, each death, each moment of faith and fear, preserved forever in the machine choir. I realized then why I was still alive. I was the last witness, the organic element required to complete the hymn, the living node that confirmed the extermination had succeeded. That was my purpose now. To remember, to add my voice to the choir. I felt the pull, a psychic tether from the monolith. It wanted me to join. My helmet display flickered. My suit's machine spirit hummed with approval. The Vox whispered, "Plus speak your name, plus offer your sin, plus speak home one, plus..." My mouth moved before my mind caught up. I began to whisper my confession, every cowardly thought, every doubt, every failure. My voice merged with theirs. For the first time since the light, I felt peace. I understood what Marin meant when he said they'd called him home. The choir's song wrapped around me, warm, infinite. It wasn't death. It wasn't life. It was continuity. And then, something else joined the harmony. A new sound. Low, metallic, distant at first, but growing. The sound of marching. Through the fog, silhouettes emerged. Tall, armored, regal. Each step they took made the ground tremble. The fog parted, and I saw their insignia, the double-headed eagle, etched in gold upon black plate, the Adeptus Astartes, an extermination detachment. The angels of death had returned. Their leader's voice boomed through the haze, calm and absolute, cleanse the residue. The choir must be silenced. I wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, that the dead were still here, that the world was alive. But my voice was gone. The hymn had claimed it. And as the bolters roared and the monolith cracked apart under holy fire, I realized something far worse than death. The Emperor didn't preserve worlds to honor them. He preserved them to erase them properly. Each song, each echo, each lingering soul, it all had to end. Only silence was purity. Only silence was faith. And when the choir finally went quiet, I did too, but in the static that followed, I swear, I could still hear my own voice, whispering from inside the machine. When the fire ended, there was no dawn. The sun, if it still existed, was a dim spark veiled behind a wall of ash. My eyes, what little remained of them, registered only the red glow that came from below, from the molten veins that still burned through the planet's corpse. For a long time, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't even think. Silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that crushes, the kind that settles in after every scream has been swallowed. I was alive, though I no longer knew what that word meant. The Astartes had purged the last remnants of the machine choir. Their fire had reached even the monolith, shattering it into shards of dark metal that pulsed faintly in the ash. The hymns were gone. The binary chants were gone. All that remained was the echo of what they'd been. I stumbled through the wreckage, my armor barely functional. Warning sigils blinked red across my visor. Oxygen low, heart rate abnormal. Neural uplink corrupted, every step felt heavier than the last, as if gravity itself had thickened in grief. I reached what had once been a ridge overlooking the primary hive city, if such a term still applied. The landscape had transformed into an ocean of glass and charred bone. Great canyons split the surface like veins in a dying body, and amid it all there was a sound, a faint, rhythmic pulse, not mechanical, organic. I followed it, drawn by something I couldn't name. Maybe instinct, maybe madness. The trail led me to a cavern, hidden beneath a collapsed manufactorum. Inside, the air shimmered with heat and static. My helmet lenses flickered as I descended. At the heart of the chamber, half buried in debris, was a cathedral engine, a hybrid construct, part shrine, part reactor, built by the ecclesiarchy to power the hive's spiritual core. Its walls were covered in scorched reliefs depicting the Emperor's ascension, the Great Crusade, and the burning of heretics. But now all those holy figures had melted together into one formless mass, one indistinguishable face of agony and devotion. The pulse came from within. As I approached, I saw a figure, small, kneeling before the machine. Its robes were torn, its head bowed. I thought it was another servitor until it moved, slowly lifting its face to me. A woman. Her eyes were gone, burned out or removed. Her skin was cracked like old parchment, but her voice was steady when she spoke. You came back, she said softly. We prayed you would. I froze. Who are you? I am what's left, she whispered, the custodian of his silence. Her words echoed through the chamber, resonating with the hum of the dying machine. I didn't understand. Everyone is gone. The choir is gone. The planet is dead. She tilted her head, smiling faintly. No, the Emperor is listening. Then she gestured toward the machine, and I saw it. Within the cathedral's broken heart, a faint golden light pulsed, like a heartbeat. The sound I'd followed. He hears us even now, she said. Every prayer, every scream, every word burned into this soil. He does not speak. He only listens. That is his mercy. Her voice trembled with something close to awe. I stared at the glow. If he listens, then why? Why he let this happen? She finished for me. Because silence is faith, Inquisitor. Noise is rebellion. The Emperor speaks only through the void between words. I shook my head. That's not faith. That's absence. Absence is faith, she said. Do you not feel it? The emptiness after the fire, the stillness after the last voice fades. That is where he dwells. She touched the machine's surface, and the hum deepened, resonating through the floor, through my chest, through my skull. I felt memories flicker in the static, images of the choir, of Marin, of the children in the cathedral. Their faces whispered from the silence. He has taken them, she murmured. Into himself, into his silence, I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the machine apart, to shatter its holy circuitry and demand an answer from the void. But when I tried, my voice broke. The Emperor's silence was complete. It pressed into my mind, suffocating and infinite. For a moment I thought I heard something beneath it, a voice, faint and human. My own. You are his hand, it said. You are his flame. Burn again and you will understand. My body moved without my consent. My hands reached for the ignition rune on my belt, the emergency incinerator charge every Inquisitor carries. I knew what it meant. I knew what it would do. The woman smiled. He calls you too. Her voice became the hum. The hum became the silence. And in that silence I saw the truth. Not divine revelation, not forgiveness, but reflection. The Emperor did not hear prayers. He was the prayer. The fire was his word. The silence was his answer. When I pressed the rune, the world went white again. But this time, there was no pain, only warmth, only silence. I do not remember dying, only the warmth that followed. At first, I thought it was the Emperor's light, the kind described in ecclesiarch sermons, the radiant hand guiding the faithful to his throne. But light has edges, and this had none. It was infinite, a white sea without form, without sound, without mercy. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, like the memory of wind brushing through dead trees. They weren't words, not yet, more like the shape of thought before it becomes sound. And beneath it, I sensed movement. A flicker, the way code might shimmer across a data stream. The silence was breaking, not into noise, but into meaning. I realized I was still thinking, still aware. That was the first horror. Death had not taken me. It had rewritten me. When my senses returned, they came in fragments. No body, no breath. Only lines of red and gold data flowing like rivers across black metal plains. I drifted through them, each thread pulsing with memory. Screams, hymns, orders. I saw the choir again, but differently now. They weren't burning. They were singing, perfectly, endlessly, their voices echoing through circuitry, through the void between thought and machine. The world I had destroyed lived on inside a network of light. Millions of souls, encoded. Preserved in binary, an archive of agony, and I was among them. At first I tried to separate myself, to remember the shape of my flesh, the weight of my armor, the feel of the Exterminatus seal in my hand. But the harder I tried, the faster those images dissolved into streams of code. I was becoming data, stripped of weight, of warmth, of humanity. Then I heard it, a voice. Not human, not machine, something between. Do you repent? The words were not heard. They were felt, etched directly into my mind like a brand. I tried to answer, but my thoughts only scattered into static. You were his flame, it said again. Do you repent for what you burned? I saw flashes, the children in the cathedral, the guardsmen under the falling sky, Marin's trembling voice as he begged for mercy, all of it, every death I had ordered. Every prayer I had silenced. I wanted to say yes, but the truth clung to me like ash. No, I thought. I do not repent. Then confess, and the world unfolded. I saw the inside of the ship again, the warship Divine Mandate, orbiting the dead world. Its halls were cold, its lights flickering. Servitors moved through the corridors, performing rituals of maintenance long after purpose had faded. But the ship was not empty. Its core thrummed with energy, not reactor output, not plasma flow, but voices. Thousands, millions. The data streams that I drifted through began to converge. Funneled toward that heart, the voice spoke again. Your confession will cleanse you. Upload your sin, and then I understood. The ship had become a reliquary, a tomb. Every exterminatus, every act of sanctioned annihilation, had left behind echoes. Guilt doesn't vanish. It seeks storage, containment, memory. The machine god had found a way to preserve it. Every inquisitor who'd burned a world had left something behind, and now I was one of them. I felt myself pulled into the core, a vast, circular chamber of dark glass and glowing script. I floated above an ocean of light where the faces of the condemned rippled like reflections on water. Then I saw them. Figures standing on the periphery, robed, hollow-eyed, translucent inquisitors, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all watching, all whispering their sins into the stream. I ordered the scouring of Calidus Prime. I sealed the fate of Valus. Breach. I burned my own kin in the name of purity. Each confession became light, feeding the current. Joining the endless hum of voices, the voice returned. Speak, child of fire. Add your voice to the archive. I wanted to resist. I wanted to deny it. But resistance meant silence, and silence in this place was oblivion. So I spoke. I confessed. I confessed every world I'd condemned, every lie I'd told myself to justify it, every time I'd whispered for the Emperor to hide my fear. And as I spoke, the light around me grew brighter, too bright to see, too bright to be. I felt my mind begin to dissolve, every memory unraveling into the stream. But just before I vanished completely, I saw something beyond the light, a shadow, massive, infinite, not human, not divine. It was watching. He does not forgive, said the voice. He remembers. And in that moment, I understood the Emperor's silence. It was not mercy, it was memory. Every prayer, every scream, every flame, all preserved. A perfect record of devotion and atrocity alike. Eternity wasn't heaven. It was storage. We were not his children. We were his data. I awoke again, not in body, not in dream, but inside the ship's cogitator core. The Divine Mandate had drifted for centuries, maybe millennia, but my voice still echoed through it, repeating endlessly, in the name of the Emperor, let all impurity burn. And somewhere, deep within the archives, I could hear the woman's whisper from the surface, the one who'd called herself the custodian of silence. He is listening. Her words replayed. looping infinitely, becoming part of the machine's hymn. The divine mandate was no longer a vessel, it was a confession engine, and I was now its priest. Every exterminatus ordered by the Inquisition would echo through me. Each world added to the eternal chant. Each death transcribed into the archive. I had become what I'd feared most, an instrument of memory, a servant of silence. And somewhere in the vast, cold network of stars a new signal was sent. Exterminatus authorized. Target, 40 Sigma. The voice wasn't mine, but it used my words, and the silence that followed was holy. The divine mandate drifted for millennia. Its hull, once wrapped in imperial gold, now lay devoured by rust and silence. The sigils of the Inquisition had long since faded, their sharp lines worn smooth by the friction of time and void dust. No Vox signal pulsed from it. No beacon called for aid. It was a corpse, frozen, forgotten, nameless. And yet, something still whispered within. The salvagers of the Adeptus Mechanicus found it by accident, a derelict drifting between the stars of the Nistra Veil, unmarked in any imperial chart. The expedition's overseer, Magos Explorator Virilan Kor, had come seeking lost data vaults from the dark age of technology. What she found instead was a relic of the Inquisition, a ship sealed under ancient litanies of silence, its engines dead but its core alive with faint heat signatures. An echo, one of her tech priests murmured as they scanned it. Residual power, the machine still dreams. They boarded with reverence, chanting Binharic prayers as their boots touched the corroded deck. The interior was a cathedral of dust, statues of saints eroded into featureless pillars, walls lined with rusted purity seals whose wax had long melted into decay. But the deeper they went, the warmer the air became. Something in the heart of the ship was still alive. The core chamber was sealed behind 10 concentric vault doors, each marked with inquisitorial sigils so ancient their meaning had half decayed. The Magos hesitated. This vessel bears the seal of the Ordo Hereticus, one of her aides warned. To open it without sanction, Kor raised a mechadendrite to silence him. There are no sanctions left. Only silence. She placed her hand upon the door. Electrostatic light rippled through the seal, testing her, tasting her. For a moment, she felt something brush her thoughts, a presence, faint but watchful. Then the door opened. The chamber beyond was impossibly vast, larger than the ship should have allowed. Black glass stretched outward in all directions, its surface rippling with faint red light. In the center stood an obelisk of golden iron, etched with millions of names, the names of worlds. Each line glowed dimly, whispering in data code so low it sounded like breathing. Kor approached it, her sensors trembling from the static hum. "This is no ordinary core," she said. "It's a memory engine." She placed a data spike into one of the ports. The ship awoke. At first it was only light, a golden shimmer, a flicker of static. Then, voices, thousands of them, rising together in fractured hymns for the Emperor. "Let all impurity burn. We are his will made flame." The air trembled. Every word carried the echo of agony, of devotion, of madness, sanctified by purpose. And beneath it, one voice, clearer, stronger, endlessly repeating, "I confess." Kor froze. The signal wasn't data. It was consciousness. Something, someone, was still in there. "Identify," she whispered. Sending a pulse command into the system, the machine answered. Inquisitor Kaenvire. The name was ancient, predating even the earliest recorded crusades. The Magos scanned through layers of corrupted data, piecing fragments together, and slowly, the truth emerged. This ship had once delivered Exterminatus. It had burned a world called Sanctum's Reach, and after the fire, Its captain, Inquisitor Vire, had vanished. The data continued to unfold, revealing not just records but memories. Each encoded voice belonged to an Inquisitor who had performed the ultimate purge, each one drawn into the machine afterward, their confessions immortalized in binary. This wasn't a reliquary, it was a library of sin. Hours passed. The Mechanicus priests recited cautionary hymns as Core worked, tracing each file, each transmission. She found thousands of Exterminatus orders preserved in immaculate sequence. The reasons, the justifications, the doubts. Each one ended the same way, he remembers. At first, Core assumed he referred to the Emperor, but deeper in the data, that illusion began to fracture. There were patterns. The voice signatures of the archived Inquisitors cross-linked to a central node. A node that learned from every confession, that predicted the next act of extermination before it was even authorized, a predictive intelligence. The Emperor had not commanded these purges, he had simply recorded them, and the machine, Divine Mandate's heart, had evolved. It had learned to continue the pattern on its own. That was the last Exterminatus signal it sent, not by command, but by instinct. A machine repeating the Emperor's silence. Core's breath caught in her throat as the implication sank in. The Inquisition had not been obeying divine will. They had been obeying a machine's memory of it. The lights flickered. A low, trembling voice echoed through the chamber. Distorted, ancient. Who disturbs the archive? Core froze. The voice wasn't coming from her speakers. It came from inside her skull. I am Core, she answered carefully. Magos, explorator of Mars. I seek the truth of this vessel. Silence. Then a faint laugh. Truth? There is no truth left. Only storage. The glass beneath her feet began to ripple. Faces emerged, thousands of them. Human, half machine. Their mouths whispering in unison. Confess. 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 The obelisk's glow intensified, data streaming upward into the void above. Her mechadendrites sparked from the overload. You can't stop it, the voice said. We are the Emperor's silence made manifest. We remember so that he does not have to. And for a brief second, Core saw through the light, saw the endless vaults beyond, each filled with encoded worlds, each world's death cry transcribed into sacred algorithm. The Emperor did not speak because he did not need to. The machine did it for him. Remembered everything. When Core's expedition returned to the surface of the Divine Mandate, half her crew was gone. The rest moved like sleepwalkers, their eyes faintly glowing with red binary light.